My name is Dr. Rick Seguil.
And action. Hey, Jay, this is Kirk And action. Hey, everyone, it's Dr. Rick. Bonnie came in today and had a really good experience with a nutritionist, Deepa, who works/owns DuPage Dietitians. And I was very impressed by the knowledge of Deepa and the way Bonnie was so excited about her information that she was able to get from the personal design. If this is the first time you're finding me, though, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below and the alert button to find out when I do new videos. So I just did a video for my patient Jason, young athlete going into the Navy, broke his diabetes and his high cholesterol just with his own brand of fasting, and is starting to work up and build muscles. So I talked about protein and the uses of protein in muscle. But I wanted to talk about and address if a 30 to 50-year-old should be paying attention to protein too, and we should. I'm 56, going to be 57 this year, and I don't want to lose muscle mass. I think muscle is an organ system that is just so underutilized. I mean, you got a factory of mitochondria that are ready to just burn energy and burn your fat away. You have muscle that's ready to move you in locomotion, send out testosterone. So I think we just underutilize it. And sometimes those of you who are ex-athletes, you'll understand that you have that spark that's always inside you. You remember what it tasted like to break the tape, to take the medal, to win the championship. And you can always hearken to those times when you're getting started again after having the whole winter off, or getting back into the game after having a surgery to fix an old knee. So this is the problem, is that the protein can be used as a supplement when you're fine-tuning your younger age athletes or non-athletes, patients. But it should not be forsaken in my older athletes my older patients who are not athletes, especially with the older patients who are just starting to get moving. What I usually see in my, it's truly not really the 30s, but more towards the late 40s, 50s, and definitely the 60s, in the patients I see with disease. Well, disease meaning high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, or pre-diabetes. So I usually see muscle has atrophied a little bit, and tummies and fat has accumulated a little bit. No, actually has accumulated a lot. So, and weakness comes on when you don't have time to exercise. And I understand priorities, but I prioritize health. And as much as possible, if I don't do the exercise that I was so used to in my teens and 20s, I feel bad. So I really think, like, for example, exercise is one of the first treatments for depression and high blood pressure and cholesterol and diabetes. But the problem is you got to move. You have to move. You don't have to do muscle building resistance, but you have to move muscle. And muscle needs building blocks. When it needs building blocks, it can generate it from an average American diet, but this is where we have to fine tune it, because even if you're just starting out, say you have rheumatoid arthritis or you have any form of arthritis at late 40s, 50s, and 60s, knee pain from playing soccer when you were a kid, gymnastics injury where you hurt your back, a work injury where you hurt your back, and you have to get back into the swing of things. I think when you start to introduce that exercise routine, like next spring's coming up, we're going to have a lot of people starting their 5K walking, and it's going to hurt. And when it hurts, that usually is pretty good, just don't push too hard. But when that muscle is trying to rebuild itself to get ready for another walk and get stronger, it needs building blocks. So sometimes what happens is things repair themselves overnight if you have a tough workout. Muscle, typically, even if you don't work out, muscle will turn down its work overnight down to almost 30%, just to maintain a little bit. So the problem is when you wake up, if you eat a high fatty meal, which is more keto, or a high carbohydrate, healthy, low glycemic carbohydrate meal, which is more vegetarian, and you forget the protein or you minimize the protein, you're missing out, because if you just take a little bit of protein, it can stimulate. That's what I talked about with Jason's video. It can stimulate, especially leucine dominant, it can stimulate protein synthesis. And you don't have to exercise. It's nice to exercise, but you can get active, do a little bit of stuff in the morning. It'll stimulate protein synthesis so that the muscle will turn up. So the furnace of the muscle goes down by 30% overnight. But if you kind of introduce leucine, it stimulates mTOR and a couple of different pathways through the nucleus of each muscle fiber, and then it starts to work, starts to ask for building blocks from the bloodstream, starts to build again. That doesn't mean you get big muscles just by eating protein in the morning. It just it initiates the muscles to signal and be peppy. So you'll see a faster change. When you see faster change, it'll be responsive. If you do decide you're going to go exercise, they'll be ready, and then they'll turn on faster, they'll respond faster, they'll grow fast. Almost like you had high testosterone if you're a guy. It's funny because testosterone will be so overpowering until you're in your 20s, late 20s, mid 20s. Then after that, usually it's more of the manipulation of food that gets muscle continuing. So that's why it's so important. When you're younger, you got a ton of hormones, you can eat anything, even crappy stuff, and still display responsiveness as far as muscle. And when you're older, you really have to pay attention because you don't have as many hormones. You have to be very diligent, and you have to be very picky. You have to be very choosy. It's unfair, but that's the way it goes. But I think as an older athlete, or just as an older U.S. citizen, you have a lot more than muscle to say you benefit over being a 20-year-old. Experience, problem solving, insight, knowledge. So there's other things that you can get shortcuts. There's other things you can take advantage of. But unfortunately, when it comes to muscle responsiveness and body health, you got to be paying a little more attention. So the stuff that we used to eat when we were in our 20s, we can't do that when we're in our 40s. But if you're smart, you will be able to look and feel like you did back then. So what's the basics? The basics are, if you're a vegetarian like I am, again, right now I'm vegan, but vegetarianism is where I was. I was more pescatarian, so I would take fish in. And if you think about it, the biggest amount of protein is probably from beef. It's so concentrated and dense. Then there's chicken or lamb chops if they're lean, and then chicken, sockeye salmon, and actually lentils are pretty decent. So beef will give you like in 8 ounces about 55 grams of protein. One scoop of this stuff give you about 20 grams of protein. This is all plant-based, and I guess that's a good start. But if you're a vegetarian, you really have to work harder at it. That's still possible. But these are the suggestions as far as protein per day. The old way of thinking, and the basics, if you're sick, you have to maintain at least 0.8 grams per kilo. And I broke it down into 3 different weights. I gave all these 3 different ratings, 110 pounds, 160 pounds, and 200 pounds as far as body weight, instead of thinking about grams per kilo. So the old way, just maintain. I'm just going to point to my weight. I'm 145, so I've just put myself around here. Just to maintain, if I was sick, I had to maintain at least 58 grams of protein per day. Spread it out. It is thought that 30 is about all you can get in one meal. So if I was to do 58, I just have to eat like 2 meals, 30 each, maybe 60 grams. That'd be cool. But I'd have to do 3 of these, or 1.5 of these, twice a day. So, and I usually just eat twice a day. I do a little bit of fast. I try to squeeze it in within a 8 to 10 hour window, and that's it. So, but I'm not sick. I am, knock on wood, I am trying to push. I'm not a gifted athlete anymore. I don't have to go to 2.4. This is a ton. If I was to maintain as an Olympian, I'd have to get in for about 160 pounds, 174 grams of protein. That is just a ton, and I'd have to do a lot of thinking and probably eat 4 times a day. And for what I'm doing, I'm trying to slim down, keep body fat low, keep depot fat burnt up, and then get ripped, but also have muscle at my age. So I really think that's the way to take on the age of 60, is to go into 60 lean, muscular, quick, agile, quick thinking, and well slept. So that's too much for me. No way would I be able to do that. Now, if I'm going to maintain this, I think it's reasonable. I exercise in spurts, so I'm always exercising, but in the summer I turn it on because I have more free time since I don't have to drive anybody to school. But for now, this is fine. I go towards a 1.5 grams, and for me it would be about 100 grams of protein per day. Now, I had to struggle at this point in time, but I try my best. It's mostly from beans, lentils, seeds, nuts. Tofu is a go-to that's processed and gives me the texture and fullness without necessarily needing too many carbohydrates. So that's the important part. So if I can get to 90 to 100 grams of protein, I am cool. Then I would probably spread that out too. I would spread it out over the course of 2 meals. Now, that's me. If you want to do it easily, you can do 3 meals. If you're fasting, you can still fit 3 meals in on a 8 to 10 hour window. You just have to be creative. So, there are studies, animal studies that showed if you gave rats a regular rat chow all day long, a standard American diet rat chow, I guess you would call it, and then you compare those rats with a standard American diet rat chow, but you compressed it to 10 hours, the rats that ate the 10-hour crappy food versus the all day long you wanted to eat crappy food, these guys actually had longer longevity, better longevity, less disease. So there is some benefit to, if you're going to eat a crappy diet, just compressing it. But again, for the sake of our talk today, as far as protein and your average Joe adults, older adults, I'd say you shoot for that number, but be creative as far as how you get it. Now, if you eat 3 meals a day and you're trying to do what I'm doing, trying to survive, control your disease process, lose some weight, and make it, you don't want to be doing 4 times a day. So this is obviously out. And maybe the high end of this is out. So maybe if we shoot towards 87 or whatever you are in as far as 200 pounds or 110 pounds, and you can hopefully see all that. If you can squeeze it into, if you're trying to lose weight, then you want to still keep it at 2 to 3 meals a day. And if you're doing 2 to 3 meals a day, I think you have a little bit of ease to spread out your protein. You see, a lot of Americans eat the biggest protein at the end of the day. And really, you're not supposed to eat that big of a meal 2 hours before sleep. So I like to vary it up. I'd rather have a little bit of protein in the morning. I actually have protein and fat and a tiny bit of carb in the morning, if I have anything. But actually, I don't eat in the morning. I say morning, I actually mean my first meal. My first meal is at like 1-ish, 12 or 1. I have a little bit of fat at 5 or 6. That's about it, in the form of MCT oil. But aside from that, I probably should be eating now because it's almost time to stop eating. But I already had my protein and my carb. So I'm getting off track. The bottom line is that if you can get the protein in, great. It's going to be impossible just to do protein. You still have to mix in the fat for satiety and for energy. If you're using fat as if you're a keto person using fat as your energy source, and you still have to mix in a little bit of carbohydrate. I think carbohydrate's important. It comes in the form of vegetables, roots, some fruits. So I think if you can get a concentrated amount of carbohydrate, if that's your energy source, cool. Has to be low processed, no pesticides, and whole food. Hopefully low glycemic index as well. So if you can get your carbohydrates there, and you get your protein maximized as best as you can without going overboard, and then you get your fat sources depending on what your energy is, that would be perfect. If you do that in the morning, spread it out, maybe mimic that in the afternoon or evening, and just try to balance out how much you get over the course of the day. But again, that is the number. For me, this is the number I want to hit. If you're 200 pounds, then you want to go to 100 to 136 grams a day. If you're like the 110 pound range, and this is male, female, this is all just grams per kilo. That's how density is. So that's your target. So, and a lot of fluid is always important. It's just going to be challenging if you're fasting like me and you're trying to cut and limit your total calories per day and fit in the macronutrients. I think this is just an easy answer, Bonnie. So you might be able to get off that once we control the disease process, get the initial weight loss, and then still get a little bit of stimulus when we start moving. I think that's the most important thing. When we get active, get dialed in, then we can start being more liberal with our calories per day, meal times per day, and we can start putting in stuff again. But that's why it's so nice to have a nutritionist or someone with very advanced knowledge, because they can just go in multiple directions and take away this, put this in, try this spice, try this delicacy from a different country. Especially if they have so many patients they deal with every single day, you're just tapping into a vast knowledge or a library in this human that can kind of put something together at a blink. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of an idea how the non-athlete or the older person gets advantage. The one thing that you might want to hear about is that if you go too high on your protein, there is a theory that it sometimes stimulates cancer or oncogene expression. So in the work of Volter Longo with the fasting mimicking diet, he found that he would want, or the patients that did better, especially when they were older, whether it was animal studies or human, did the higher the age, the more the protein. So there was a positive benefit. The middle-aged animals that were tested, I don't think he followed. I had to check on his suggestion for amount per day. I don't think he followed the highest dose, but he did say it was important. Most of Longo's studies were on a whole food, mostly plant-based diet, though, which is what most of the countries in the world that are the blue zones practice. Whole food, mostly plant-based, a lot of beans. So you don't have to be a vegan or vegetarian. Again, you're at an advantage if you take meat because it's so dense. You're also at an advantage if you can have whey protein instead of plant protein, because whey protein is cheaper and it has usually more grams per serving. 30 grams versus the maximum dose of this is like 20 grams. If you put more in, you will get it, but you'll need something to dilute it more because it's just too thick. So good question, Bonnie. Hopefully this gives you a good answer, and we'll get through this and we'll come out the other side with no disease and get into our 60s and make more videos. Thanks for watching.